Buckle your seatbelts. That's all I can say. Buckle up. Yeah, just like on the airplane. Make sure your seatbelts are fastened for this teaching. That's right. Decoding Daniel. There's a lot to decode here. Last week is when we began the book of Daniel. We covered chapter 1 and 2. We're going to go back over chapter 1 and 2 again in a little more detail. There's so much good stuff, and then we may end up touching on chapter 3 a little bit. Okay, now, one of the things we want to cover this morning, too, is what brought on the Nebuchadnezzar and the war. Why did Israel go through what they went through? Why did Nebuchadnezzar come? What were the conditions? They say the one thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. And so I think we need to learn historically what brought God's judgment so that we might not bring God's judgment upon us. What a concept. Now, one of the things, if you look at this slide, there were two main kings who ruled Israel before the destruction of the temple. One, just minor one, was Jehoahaz, who only served 3 months, and then Egypt hauled him off, and Egypt installed Jehoiakim, who reigned 11 years. Now, you'll notice on this chart above Jehoiakim's name is a 1, 2, 3. Daniel chapter 1 took place in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. Daniel chapter 2 and 3 covered the 5th year of Jehoiakim. But I want you to notice also in purple, Jerusalem was besieged 3 times. They were besieged in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. And then you'll notice, like in the 10th year, it was besieged again. And then it was also besieged during the time of Zedekiah, the 9th year. And captives, people were taken captive all throughout this 22-year time period. There was another king, Jehoiakim in red, who only ruled 3 months. Okay, so your main kings that ruled 11 years apiece were half-brothers, Jehoiakim and Zedekiah. But I want you to notice the Bible, we talked about last week, on the far left in the 3rd year, Daniel was taken to Babylon with the other Hebrew children in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. That's what it says. Now, Daniel, they say, was anywhere from 12 to 14 years old. And the other 3, they took the Hebrew children, not their focus was on the kids. We're going to look at this more here in a little bit. But here's what's crazy. Daniel's chapter 1, 2, and 3 all took place toward the very beginning of Jehoiakim. Do you see that? He's having the vision of Nebuchadnezzar's big, tall image, right? This is about 20 years before the destruction of the temple at the 11th year of Zedekiah. Because you have 11 years of Zedekiah, then you have like 8 years. You're looking at 19 years. So 20 years before the destruction of the temple, you have Daniel taken, he has the vision of the big image, right? In the book of Daniel, you don't hear from him again until 50 years after the destruction of the temple. So basically 70 years go by before we hear from Daniel again in the rest of the book. But if you don't know the timeline, you don't realize he's taken at 14 years old, roughly, in chapters 1 through 3, we don't hear from him again until he's in his 80s. The rest of the book of Daniel, he's in his 80s and 90s. So there's this huge gap. We don't hear anything from Daniel during the destruction of the temple or afterwards. He's totally silent, which I found very fascinating. Let's take a moment and remind ourselves what led to the destruction of the temple anyway. In 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 10 through 12, the Lord said, by his servants, the prophets, because Manasseh, king of Judah, has done these disgusting things, doing more evil than all the Amorites before him, and he made Judah to do evil with his false gods. It says, for this cause, says the Lord, the God of Israel, I will send such evil on Jerusalem and Judah that the ears of all to whom the news comes will be burning. Manasseh, in case some of you may not be familiar with this, guess who his father was? Hezekiah. Who was Hezekiah married to? Isaiah's daughter. So Manasseh becomes king like at 12, 13 years old, little bar mitzvah boy. And he is a tyrant. And so here you are, Isaiah's daughter as his mother, and you have a monster for a child who is king. And guess what this monster does? His grandpa is Isaiah. Isaiah is Manasseh's grandpa. And Manasseh is throwing his grandkids in the fire to Molech, killing them. Isaiah's grandkids are being sacrificed to Molech. And then, of course, he's going to reprove his grandson. Well, guess what Manasseh does? Those who don't know history, he is the one who Isaiah was running from. He hid in a tree, and Manasseh sawed Isaiah in half, his grandpa. Okay? Manasseh did evil in the sight of the Lord with everything that he was doing. And so God is saying, because Manasseh has done all these disgusting things, I'm going to bring evil. Now, look at 2 Kings 21, verse 15 and 16. It goes on to say that God says, because they've done evil in my eyes, moving me to wrath from the day when their fathers came out of Egypt to this day, more than this, Manasseh took the lives of upright men till Jerusalem from one end to the other was full of blood. In addition to his sin and making Judah do evil in the eyes of the Lord. So he not only is making Israel to do evil, he's murdering innocent people. Matter of fact, it gets worse. Look at 2 Kings 23, 25 through 27. This is all because of one man. It says, never before had there been a king like him, turning to the Lord with all of his heart and with all of his soul and with all of his power, as the law of Moses says. And after him there was no king like him. Okay, but still the heat of the Lord's wrath. This is not referring to Manasseh here. Okay, but still this is referring to Josiah, King Josiah. Okay, who had Jehoiakim. He was a wonderful king, it says. There was no king like him. But look what it says then. Even though there was that repentance and the greatest Passover there ever was, it says, but still the heat of the Lord's wrath was not turned back from Judah because of all Manasseh had done in moving him to wrath. So think about this. Here you have Hezekiah gives birth to this monster Manasseh. Manasseh gives birth to his son Ammon, who only reigns 2 years, from like 20 years old to 22 years old, and then he's murdered, a political hit on the inside. And then comes Josiah, okay? So Manasseh is Josiah's grandpa. And this says, in spite of the fact that Josiah repented, even though Josiah turned to the Lord with all of his heart, had the greatest Passover ever, still God had to judge Israel and Jerusalem because Manasseh was so evil. So we have to realize sometimes we can repent as a nation and turn, but the wrath is still going to come. What we got to be praying for is mitigation. Okay? There's, as a matter of fact, in the book of Jeremiah, God told Jeremiah, I can show you at least 3 times where he says, don't pray for this people. Don't even pray. Time's up. Judgment's coming. You know, so I believe we have to realize one individual can really bring judgment on a nation regardless, and then we need to be praying. But look at this. This is what is crazy. It goes on to say, and the Lord said, I will send Judah away from before my face. Wow, you always want God's face to shine upon you and lift his countenance upon you. When he sends you away from his face, trouble is coming. As I've said, Israel, he says, I will have nothing more to do with this town, Jerusalem, which I had made mine, even Jerusalem and the holy house of which I said, my name will be there. Now look at 2 Chronicles 33, 9 through 11. Manasseh made Judah and the people of Jerusalem go out of the true way, so that they did more evil than those nations whom the Lord gave up to destruction before the children of Israel even got there. And the word of the Lord came to Manasseh and his people, but they gave no attention. So the Lord sent against them the captains of the army of Assyria. Look at this, who made Manasseh a prisoner and took him away in chains to Babylon. Did you know Manasseh was so bad, God, while he was king, had the Assyrians come and take him away and hauled him off in chains to Babylon. But guess what happens? Look at 2 Chronicles 33, 12 and 13. This horrible Manasseh cried out to the Lord his God in his trouble. He made himself low before the God of his fathers. He made a prayer to him, and in his answer to his prayer, God let him come back to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. And then Manasseh was certain that the Lord was God. This most evil, horrible king, God forgave and restored him back to his kingdom. So you should have hope. But here's the other fascinating thing. If you remember in the story we're going to read, Nebuchadnezzar also has his kingdom taken away during his reign, and he's basically chained and in fetters, but God also restores him. And can you believe it? The Bible always says it's not how you begin, it's how you end. So it doesn't matter what's in your past, it's what's in your future and how you behave. Can you imagine there will be some religious people who are holy all their life and then they turn evil at the end, and guess what? Manasseh is going to be in heaven before them. Crazy. Okay. Let's look at 2 Chronicles 33, 15 and 16. What did Manasseh do? Look at what Manasseh did. He took away the strange gods and the image out of the house of the Lord and all the altars he had put on the hill of the Lord's house and in Jerusalem. And he put them out of the town. And he put the altar of the Lord in order, offering peace offerings, praise offerings on it, and said that all of Judah were to be servants of the Lord, the God of Israel. Isn't that amazing? Here, the most evil king recorded in all of history in the Bible now becomes a tzaddik. Okay, so now let's go back. This next thing is going to blow you away. I mean, are you ready? Let's go to the very beginning. Daniel 1, verse 1 and 2. As you can see on the chart, it was in the 3rd year of the rule of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, comes to Jerusalem. He shuts it in with his forces, okay? And the Lord gave into his hands Jehoiakim, king of Judah. But what else? He also got some of the vessels of the house of God that he took away into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. In other words, my God can beat up your God. I'm taking some of the vessels of your God's house and I'm putting them in my God's house. And he put the vessels into the storehouse of his God. My question to you is this. Where do we first hear of Shinar? Exactly. Shinar we hear right after Noah's flood. And it's the building of the Tower of Babel. Look at Genesis 11, 1 and 2. All the earth had one language, one tongue, and it came about that in their wandering from the east, they came to a stretch of flat country in the land of what? Shinar. And there they made their living place. I have a little map here of Shinar in red to the right. You see over by the Persian Gulf, Elam is Iran. But you can see Shinar was in Babylon. It was to the south and east of the city of Babylon. That's where Shinar is. And it's kind of lower in elevation. And you can see it says a flat country. I'm going to give you the name of that flat country in a little bit. Right now we're focused. Shinar is like the state, let's say, and this flat country is like a city. So think of Shinar geographically as a bigger area. And there's a little flat area within Shinar. But look at this. It says that is where they made their living place, in Shinar. Do you know why that is incredible to me? Shinar in Hebrew means shaken out. Like you have a bunch of crumbs on a blanket and you shake all the crumbs off the blanket. Well, guess what? Historically, they say Shinar was the very area where all the dead bodies after the flood ended up collecting. Because it was a low-lying area. They were all shook out there. And that's where they decide to build their city in defiance of God. They build the Tower of Babel over the dead bones, saying, we will build again. You may have killed us, but in Shinar over these dead bodies, God, we're going to build this Tower of Babel. Now, the vessels of the temple are being placed in the temple of the Babylonian God right there in Shinar, where Nebuchadnezzar is now giving credit to his victory over Jerusalem to his idol. Now, get a load of this. Daniel chapter 1, verse 3. And so Nebuchadnezzar the king gives orders to Ashpenaz, the captain of his what? Eunuchs can have no more kids. Eunuchs can have no family. And Daniel was one of the eunuchs. It was Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. That's what happened to these 14-year-old boys when they get taken over. The captain of the eunuchs takes charge of them. Okay, because look here. The king gave orders, the captain of his eunuchs, to take in some of the children of Israel, certain of the king's family. Why? He wants to destroy the king's royal seed. Just like with Amalek, God says, destroy the royal line. That is what they do. Daniel was from the tribe of Judah and of the royal line of the king's family. So this is what is going on in those of high birth. Now here, when you think about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as teenagers becoming eunuchs, what does Isaiah also say in 39, verse 5 through 8? Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, give ear to the word of the Lord of armies. Truly, the days that are coming when everything in your house, whatever your fathers have put in store till this day, will be taken to Babylon. Isaiah is prophesying to Hezekiah, saying this is going to happen to your kids. It's all going to be taken away to Babylon. And your sons, even your offspring, will they take away to be eunuchs in the house of Babylon. Here's the prophecy that is what was going to happen. And then look what Hezekiah said to Isaiah. Well, it's a good thing it's not happening in my day. That's all he could say. So Daniel was believed to be of the royal seed because he was from the tribe of Judah. But here's the thing also. We know from Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49, 9 and 10, Judah was to be a lion's whelp. He's going to be as a lion and as a lioness. That's why in the lion's den, the lions didn't bug him because he was the Lion King. He's the king of the lions. What could the lion? Remember, everything's patterned on what's in heaven. He is the true lion. And so the lions had to honor him as the Lion King. Now, but let's go back to Daniel 1, 6 and 7. It says, and among these there were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and the captain of the unsexed servants gave them names. To Daniel he gave the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, Mishael, Meshach, Azariah, the name of Abednego. Okay, so again, these are children that were taken. These weren't adults. Daniel and his friends were kids. Okay, but here's the other thing. Poor Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they can never have, their family name is gone. So look what Isaiah also says in chapter 56. Thus says the Lord to you eunuchs that are keeping my Sabbath, and choose what pleases me, and take hold of my covenant, even to you I will give a name in my house within my walls, a place and a name better than of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name, and it won't be cut off. And so it's amazing to me that we today hear of these young men, even though they became eunuchs, their name has never been cut off. Isn't this just amazing? But wait, there's more. Here we go. Let's look at Daniel 1, 8 through 12. Daniel purposes in his heart he's not going to defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. We talked about that a little bit last week because it was probably unclean food. But even more than that, it probably was offered up to an idol. And so that, even if it was kosher, if it's offered up to an idol, he's not going to want to partake it. It says, therefore, he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. And so God brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said to Daniel, hey, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse, liking than the children of which you are of your sort? You know, I mean, think about this for a minute. How many of you, when you go over to someone's house to eat, you should be kind and eat the food they set before you, right? Okay. How do you think the king is going to feel if Daniel and his friends refuse to eat his food? He's going to be insulted. Off with your head, you know, kind of a thing. And so the prince of the eunuchs thinks it's going to be off with my head too if I don't give you this food. So no matter what, I've got to take this food. What are we going to do? Okay. Now, the nice thing is there's 3 years before the king is going to see Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego again. It's going to be 3 years. So they have to develop a plan. And he says, well, then you're going to endanger me and my head to the king. So Daniel said to Meltzar, that's his name, who is the prince of the eunuchs, had said over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he says, hey, prove your servants, I beseech you, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Now, pulse is uncooked vegetables. He didn't even want the vegetables cooked with their other food. But look at this in Daniel 1, 14 through 16. So he consented to them in this matter. He proves them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children who ate the portion of the king's meat. And so look at what it says. Thus Meltzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink and gave them pulse. Want to hear the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say? Guess what? He still didn't want the king or the cooks to know they weren't eating. So he brought the uncooked vegetables from home, and he took home all the meat and the wine. He got a party for 3 years with the king's food. He didn't mind. He said, sure, I'll give you pulse. I'm taking this home, all this fine cuts of food. Now, Daniel 1:21, Daniel continued, it says, even to the first year of King Cyrus. Now, we know it actually was the 3rd year. But let's go to Daniel 2, 17 through 19. We know that Daniel had to interpret the dream or all the wise men were going to be killed. So it says in Daniel 2, 17 through 19, then Daniel went to his house. Why? He knows he's not going to, in the house of the king, it's a defiled place. He needs to go where it's not as defiled to have a godly dream. And so he goes and he makes it known to his companions that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows would not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. And then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. And so Daniel blesses the God of heaven. Who revealed it to Daniel? Well, ultimately, but let me tell you who revealed it to him. It's the same guy who's revealing everything else to him. Look at Daniel 8, 15 and 16. It came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought the meaning. Behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. And look at Daniel 9, 21 and 22. He says, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision, who appeared to Miriam, Gabriel appears to Mary at the virgin birth. I mean, who? Gabriel is the man with the message. Okay. Okay, back to chapter 2. Okay, here we are. I got the picture of this, the image of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Everyone pretty much knows that the gold, the head, referred to Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. And then the silver, the two arms, refers to the Medes and the Persians, the next government. And then you have the stomach refers to Greece. Okay, that's who took over after the Medes and the Persians. And then let's watch what happens here. In Daniel 2:40 through 43. We'll pick it up there. The fourth kingdom is going to be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron breaks all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas you saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, this will be a divided kingdom. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, as much as you saw the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were also part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas you saw the iron mixed with the miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as the iron is not mixed with the clay. Okay, there's always a big dispute. Okay, what happened? Who is this? So I'm going to give you a little explanation of what I have, and also from some of the things that I've read. Now, everyone knows the first was Babylon, the next was the Medes and the Persian, the next was the Greek, and now we pretty much know the last one, the fourth one, is the Roman Empire, but there's two legs, and there's the extension of the feet and the toes. So they want to know, what is the extension of that Roman Empire? Who could that be? Well, I believe one thing, just as the two arms represented the Medes and the Persian, two nations, the two legs also could, in one sense, refer to two entities. You following me? Because that's what the arms did. Why couldn't the legs also refer to Rome, an extension of Rome, and something else? Well, get a load of this. Rome is obvious because they were the next kingdom to destroy Jerusalem in 70 AD. So we pretty much, this whole image is about Jerusalem, guys. It's who's controlling not just the world, but who's controlling Jerusalem and Israel. Now, just as Antiochus Epiphanes, if you remember, in the Greek kingdom, it was Alexander the Great. And then the horn was broken and came into 4 horns. We know that were his 4 generals. And then from that came one little horn. That's Antiochus Epiphanes of the Hanukkah story. So we know there are extensions. All right, is everyone following me? So the same thing with the legs, the feet, and the toes. These are who's somewhat within the Roman Empire, but extensions. Okay. Well, who were the next two entities battling over Jerusalem for the next 1500s? It was the Catholics and the Arabs. That's the one who controlled Jerusalem. Christianity and the Arabs. Okay, and you have the Crusades. Who's ever heard of the Crusades? What do you think? This really, then after that, you have the Ottoman Empire, which is the Arabs again controlling Jerusalem until World War I. So for the last 2,000 years, the two legs could very well be the Arabs and the Christians. Now, I'm not saying they're good or bad. It's just that these are the powers. Everyone can decide if they're a good power or a bad power. I mean, Greece, in one sense, had a lot of good stuff they brought to the world. Okay, but I'm telling you, it looks like these two legs could very well be the Arab Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I was raised Catholic, and people would always ask our family, if we're Christians or not, or whatever. And I would say we're Catholic, and my parents would say, no, we're Roman Catholic. You're not just Catholic. How many of you know, just like iron and clay don't mix, there was the Eastern Orthodox and the Western Orthodox. And in Islam, you got the Sunnis and the Shiites. You have two within each one, and they don't get along. Isn't that kind of fascinating as well? Okay, now they say in one sense the 10 toes represent 10 nations. Well, what they talk about with the feet and the toes also in the sense of partly broken and partly strong, among these 5 nations on each foot for a total of 10, some of the nations will be strong nations and some of the nations will be weaker nations. You could look at it that way. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting, how do you know the feet, the toes is the end of the matter? I mean, that's it. And then the big rock comes and smites the feet. Well, what one of the commentators said was basically these end time nations are those who have citizens who have different cultures, different ethnic groups, religions, and political divisions. Okay, and they're not mixing well. They don't play well in the sandbox. Okay, and so like a melting pot, they live side by side but have no love toward each other. How do you know America is a powerful nation that's a melting pot? And do we have any political divisions, religious divisions? Okay, different cultures, different ethnic groups. Okay, now, here's the next thing. This is amazing. Daniel 2, verse 46, after Daniel interprets the dream. Nebuchadnezzar falls on his face and worships Daniel and commands that they should offer an oblation and sweet orders to him. Did Daniel refuse being worshipped? They say he didn't, and that's why he was tested in the lion's den many years later as well, which is kind of interesting. But let's jump over to Daniel 3, 1 and 2. So Nebuchadnezzar makes this image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura. That's that flat country in Shinar, where all the bones of the flood had settled. It was the plain of Dura that they built the Tower of Babel. It's the same place the fiery furnace was. It's the same place the den of lions was. It's the place where Nebuchadnezzar's image is built in the plain of Dura in the land of Shinar, in the province of Babylon. And then it says this, King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather all the officials, the satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the Hanukkah, the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. All right, now here's the thing. The 60 cubits by 6 cubits, if you want to know what that is in footage, 9 feet wide, but 90 feet tall. Very unstable. It's going to fall anyway. You have something that's just 9 feet wide and 90 foot high. Okay, but now watch this in Daniel 3, 3 through 5. He calls everybody to come to the dedication ceremony. So the satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, justices, magistrates, and look at this, and all the officials of the provinces that he controlled gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And here they are standing before the image that Nebuchadnezzar set up when a heralder proclaims aloud, all you are commanded, O people, nations, and languages. Notice there's 3 different things here. Peoples, nations, languages. When you hear the sound of the musical instruments, you're to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Okay, now here's something you need to catch. The proclamation was addressed only to the officials who were acting in their capacity as representatives of their own peoples, nations, and languages. Now, what's the differences between them? There's a little different spelling in Hebrew, and the word peoples refers to a group with a common political system living under one government. Okay, peoples, the Hebrew word for peoples here refers to a group with a common political system living under one government. When he says nations, these are people united by one common religion, and languages refers to those who have the same language. Let me see. Now, I don't have this written. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. Okay, so now let's look at Daniel 3, 6, and 7. It says, whoever does not fall down and worship shall win. Immediately be cast into the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn and all the music, all the people, nations, and languages, what did? They fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar set up. They didn't like the phrase immediately. Look at verse 8 through 11. Therefore, at that time, Chaldeans came forward, and they maliciously accused the Jews. And they declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of all the music will fall down and worship the golden image, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And then in verse 12 he says, hey, there are certain Jews whom you appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and these men, O king, don't pay any attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. All right. Here's the bigger ramifications. These three Jews were representing as officials all the Jewish people. So not only would they be thrown in the fiery furnace, all the Jews would be killed. Now, can you imagine, how would you like to be the representative? It's one thing if they kill you, but if you don't obey, they're also going to kill everyone else, all your family, all your friends. So they had a tough decision to make because they were the representatives. They were the Jewish delegation at the dedication. And so in Daniel 3, 13 through 15, Nebuchadnezzar's in a furious rage. And he commands that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered. No, here, they were supposed to be immediately thrown in the fire. Here, because of who they were, Nebuchadnezzar allows, a dialogue. And he said to them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I've set up? Realize these kids are 14 or 15 years old. And he says, now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the music again, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well, that's well and good. He gives them a second chance. But if you don't worship, you will immediately be cast in the burning fire furnace. And who is the God who's going to deliver you out of my hands? Basically, they say, my God's hands are bigger than your God's hands. So Daniel 3, 16 through 18, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answer. And they said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known, O king, we're not going to serve your gods or worship the stinking golden image that you have set up. How many of you know that did not please Nebuchadnezzar? So, in verse 19 through 21, Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So he ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to do what? Bind them, tie them up, cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, tunics, hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the fiery furnace. Imagine, all bound up, they can't move their arms or legs, and they are just thrown into the fiery furnace. And then in verse 22 and 23, it says, because the king's order was urgent, and the furnace was overheated, the flame of the fire killed all the men who picked up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men fell, how? Bound into the burning fiery furnace. They're all bound. They are literally bound. So they're laying down when they're thrown in, all bound up. And then in verse 24 and 25, King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose up in haste, and he declared to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? And they answered and said to the king, true, O king. And he answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like the Son of God's. Who could that be? Now, what is fascinating, let me go back a slide, other way. Take a look at this. Do you see, it was in the 5th year you'll find that the Hebrew children were thrown into the fiery furnace. It was toward the end of the 5th year. Because if you remember, they had to be tested 3 years. They were grabbed the beginning of the 3rd year, all the 4th year, to the end of the 5th year is 3 years. Okay, it's at the end of the 5th year that the image was set up. Well, do you know, it was in that same year of Jehoiakim when Jeremiah had Baruch write a scroll warning of the word of the Lord to be read in front of the king. Jehoiakim has the word of the Lord in a scroll, and he does not heed the word, and he cuts the scroll up into 3 or 4 pieces and throws the word of the Lord into the fire. Here, the word of the Lord is thrown into the fire in Jerusalem, and the word of the Lord appears in the fire in Babylon. God's timing is amazing. And so Daniel 3:26, Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. And he said, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, okay, sure, what do you want? Comes out of there. Now, I think it's interesting that when you read Jeremiah, they weren't sure if it was 3 or 4 leaves that were thrown into the fire. And here, Nebuchadnezzar's not sure. Is there 3 or 4 people we see in the fire? So what happens in Daniel 3:27-28? Now, here's the thing. A lot of these satraps, prefects, governors, and king's counselors were jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they is the one who caused this to happen. When they saw that the fire did not have any power over the bodies of those men, they all saw it. It wasn't just Nebuchadnezzar. Everyone saw that. Matter of fact, it says the hair of their heads weren't singed. Their cloaks weren't even harmed. No smell of the fire or smoke had come on them. Nebuchadnezzar answers and says, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. If you're going to worship God, you've got to destroy the other gods. You can't, no assimilation. So Daniel 3:29-30, Nebuchadnezzar says, therefore I'm going to make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb. Their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. So the king promotes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Amen. I love the book of Daniel. It is incredible. We're going to jump into it more next week.